The conference table smelled like someone's lunch, a microwaved something with too much garlic. And the overhead fluorescents were doing that thing where one bulb flickers once every 3 seconds. I had counted 11 flickers before Hadrian finished speaking. "We're offering you a lateral transfer to the district office," he said. "Director of Curriculum Development. It's a meaningful role, Mara, one that leverages your experience at a broader level." I kept my hands flat on the table. 12 years. 12 years I had run Thornfield Academy, and he was describing what was happening to me with the word lateral, as though nothing was moving downward at all. "Who's taking the position at Thornfield?" I asked. He reached for his water glass. Not to drink, just to hold. "We've identified a strong candidate," he said. "Arabella Cosima. Well, she comes highly recommended." I had never heard of Arabella Cosima. He said a few more things after that. Something about the district's evolving vision. Something about the value of experience at scale. I heard all of it clearly and retained none of it because the useful information had been delivered in the first 30 seconds, and everything after was administrative padding designed to make what had happened feel mutual. It was not mutual. I thanked him and left. The 34-minute drive from the district office to my apartment was the first time I let myself think clearly. Not feel, think. I had not been fired. This was important. The termination of a tenured principal in this district required a formal hearing, documented performance failures, and a vote from the Board of Education. Hadrian knew this. Which was why he hadn't tried to fire me. The transfer route was faster, technically a promotion in title, even if the reality was a closet-sized office in a building that smelled like old carpet and institutional caution. No hearing required, no board vote, just a folder of paperwork and a reasonable tone of voice. I drove past Thornfield on the way home. Force of habit. I had driven this route for 12 years, and my hands knew it better than my mind did. The building was brick, 4 stories, corner lot with the oak trees I had fought to keep when the district wanted the sidewalk widened. The lights in the 3rd-floor science wing were still on. Mrs. Ferris would be finishing her prep for tomorrow. The parking lot had that particular emptiness of a school day after 4 o'clock. Just a few cars belonging to the people who stayed later than they were required to. I didn't stop. I filed the image away instead. People who worked with me sometimes said I was difficult to read. I took it as a compliment, though I understood they didn't mean it as one. I had grown up in a family where the quietest person in the room usually knew the most. My mother had been a bookkeeper for a construction firm for 22 years. She had a system for everything. She filed every invoice, every contract amendment, every deviation note, every communication that referenced a financial decision. She did not do this because she expected crisis. She did it because she understood that memory is partial and documentation is not. "You document everything," she told me once. Because the day will come when someone else's memory will conveniently fail them, and yours must not. I had taken that seriously in a way she probably hadn't anticipated I would take it. I had a filing system that predated my tenure at Thornfield by 3 years, organized by year, then by month, then by category. Every directive from the district, every policy change, every email I had sent or received on a work matter, every parent meeting logged with date, attendees, and outcomes. Every formal complaint received, every commendation issued, every grant awarded, and every renewal cycle, every contract signed, and every amendment negotiated. I had never done this because I expected to need it. I did it because I was my mother's daughter. That night, sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of water I didn't drink, I opened my laptop and began the first in what would become a very long series of entries in a document I titled simply Thornfield. The staff meeting the following Tuesday was mandatory. The entire faculty, the administrative team, the support staff. I stood at the side of the room. Hadrian stood at the front. He spoke about growth and opportunity and the district's vision for Thornfield in its next phase. He spoke about how change, even welcome change, could feel unsettling to those who had invested deeply in a place. He spoke about Mara. That was me, standing 10 feet to his left, and her remarkable legacy and her exciting new role supporting curriculum development at the district level. I watched their faces while he spoke. The newer teachers had the careful expressions of people taking a read from the veterans. And when the veterans had the practiced stillness of people who had learned not to react until they understood what was being asked of them. Mrs. Ferris, who had been here longer than anyone and whom I had worked with since my first week, was looking at her hands. Gideon, who had been teaching AP history at Thornfield for 16 years, was in the second row with a yellow legal pad on his knee. He was not writing anything. He was looking at me with an expression that was difficult to describe, except that it was the expression of someone taking very careful stock of a situation. I gave him the smallest nod I had. He turned back to face Hadrian. After the meeting, as people filed out in the particular silence of a group that has been told something and has not yet decided how to discuss it among themselves, Gideon fell into step beside me in the hallway. The hallway smelled like chalk and the particular mix of lemon floor cleaner and old building that I had long ago stopped noticing except when I tried to. "You're not going quietly," he said. It was not a question. "I'm going to the district office," I said. "And from there, I'm going to watch very carefully." He nodded once, the way someone nods when they understand more than what was said. "I'll keep my phone on," he told me. Let me explain what Thornfield Academy was, because that context matters for everything that comes after. It was not a failing school. It was not a turnaround story. When I arrived 12 years ago, it had been a mid-performing school in a district that was quietly hemorrhaging good students to private alternatives. Solidly mixed neighborhood, age demographics that reflected the actual community rather than a curated image of it. Staff that ranged from exceptional to exhausted. Over 12 years, I had built it into something specific and deliberate. The early childhood program that fed into kindergarten was the result of a federal grant I had written myself, a 17-page application that I had revised 4 times before submitting, incorporating research from 3 different developmental frameworks, and tying outcome metrics to the district's 5-year strategic plan in a way that made the review committee's job easier. That grant had been renewed twice. It supported 12 staff positions and served 340 students annually. The STEM track had come from a partnership I had negotiated with Aldercroft University's engineering department. It had started as a 1-semester pilot in year 3 and had grown into a 4-year sequence with dual enrollment agreements allowing high school students to earn university credit. Marcus, my STEM coordinator, had managed that partnership with a precision that matched my own. The relationship with Aldercroft had a formal memorandum of understanding, renewed annually, with specific clauses governing staff continuity and institutional contact. The reading intervention program had been designed by a specialist I had recruited personally after reading her published research in an academic journal. I had no institutional reason to be reading. I had cold emailed her. She had come to Thornfield as a consultant and had, 2 years later, taken a full-time position because she believed in what we were doing. Her program had halved the district's lowest reading scores within the school in 4 years. It ran 4 days a week. It was tied to specific federal grant compliance requirements. It was not simply a nice program, it was a structural commitment. None of these things had happened because I was lucky or well-connected. They had happened because I knew how to read a budget, write a grant, negotiate a contract, and hold a line when the district or a vendor or a board member wanted me to compromise on something I understood better than they did. I had never been Hadrian's favorite. I was too specific, too inclined to cite documentation in meetings, too willing to say, politely but without apology, that a proposed change conflicted with an existing agreement that I would be happy to provide for review. And he preferred principals who nodded and then figured things out on their own. What I had never fully understood, until now, was how much that had mattered to him over time, and in what direction. Arabella arrived the following Monday. I know this because I was still technically in my office that week. There was a 3-week transition period built into the arrangement. I had insisted on it, using language from my contract about administrative continuity, and Hadrian had agreed without visible reluctance, which told me the timeline wasn't his primary concern. I was there when she walked in. Arabella was 31 years old. I know this because I had spent the previous 48 hours carefully reading everything publicly available about her. Her educational background was a mid-tier program, competent but not distinguished. She had 2 years of experience as an assistant principal at a charter school in another state, which had not been low-performing but had also not been particularly notable. There were no published records of her work that I could find, no grants written, no research cited, no institutional partnerships bearing her name. What there was, if you looked carefully, was a connection to a consulting firm called Wyndham Educational Partners. Wyndham was listed as a previous employer on a professional profile she had not updated recently, and Wyndham Educational Partners had, 8 months ago, contracted with our district to run a professional development program at 3 schools. I had been on the committee that reviewed the Wyndham proposal. I had raised questions about their methodology and their pricing structure. Thought I had submitted a written memo with 3 specific concerns. Hadrian had thanked me for my input and approved the contract anyway. I sat with this information for a long time. I was not making accusations. I was observing architecture. Arabella came into the building on that first Monday, carrying a large tote bag and wearing a blazer that was the right kind of expensive. She was polished in the way that requires effort, but is designed to look effortless. She shook hands firmly and laughed at the right moments, and called everyone by first name within the first hour, which meant she had done preparation work. What she had not done was understand what she was walking into. She had prepared for the surface of the school. She had not been given the infrastructure beneath it. Because the person who was supposed to transfer that infrastructure, which was me, had been given a desk near a storage room and told to update the district's reading standards alignment document from 2019. My new office at the district building was on the 2nd floor, between that storage room and an office belonging to a man named Prosper, who I would encounter only once and who appeared to be doing a crossword puzzle. The desk was large and clean and entirely empty. I was given a laptop, a new email address, and a meeting with my new supervisor, a woman named Josephine, who had the particular energy of someone very capable who had long ago concluded that certain battles were not winnable and had made her peace accordingly. She showed me my first assignment, reviewing the district's K-8 Reading Standards Alignment document, last updated in 2019. Right, I said. I would do the work. I was not a person who performed incompetence to make a point, but I would also use every hour of institutional access I still had to understand exactly what had been done to me and why, and what could be done about it. These 2 things were not in conflict. On my second day, I pulled up the Thornfield files I still had legitimate access to, curriculum-related files which fell under my new portfolio, and I found the first thing I had expected to find. The federal grant for the early childhood program had a 3-year renewable cycle. The renewal window opened in 4 months. The application had to be submitted by the building principal and required documentation that only someone with deep institutional familiarity with the program could accurately compile. There was no indication in the transition documentation that Arabella had been briefed on any of this. I copied the grant file to a personal folder. Then I wrote a memo to Josephine flagging the approaching renewal deadline. I CC'd Hadrian. I kept my copy. Gideon texted me on Arabella's 4th day. She canceled the weekly department head meeting, going to monthly. Also asked why AP History has a unit on labor organizing. I read this twice before responding. Document that conversation. Time, date, what was said exactly. Already did. He wrote back 3 minutes later. The department head meeting had been weekly for 9 years. It was the structural mechanism by which program coordinators, department chairs, and the administrative team maintained alignment. And I had established it in year 3 after a communication failure between the special education coordinator and the English department had resulted in a student receiving inconsistent services for an entire semester. The weekly cadence was not bureaucratic habit. It was load-bearing. The labor organizing unit in AP History was tied to specific state standards, had been reviewed without objection by the district's curriculum office, and had contributed to a 17-point improvement in AP exam scores over 3 years when Gideon restructured the course around it. I opened my laptop and wrote this down. I want to be clear about what I was doing during those first weeks, because it is easy to misread. I was not stalking Arabella. I was not conducting a covert campaign. I was doing something more specific. I was creating a complete and accurate record of the institutional baseline. Every program, every grant, every contract, every staff arrangement, every partnership agreement, every compliance obligation. 12 years of infrastructure written into a single master document that I was cross-referencing against the files I had maintained throughout my tenure. My new role gave me legitimate access to a significant portion of this material. What I didn't have direct access to, I reconstructed from memory and from documents that had been in my possession throughout my time at the school. Every entry was dated. Every source was noted. Every claim was specific. I heard about the first formal parent complaint from Gideon on Arabella's 8th day. A parent had requested a meeting about a change to the after-school tutoring schedule. The tutoring program had run on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 6 years, tied to bus schedules and family work patterns that had been specifically surveyed when I designed it. Arabella had moved it to Wednesdays only, citing room availability, without consulting the parent coordinator or sending advance notice. The parent had asked for the reasoning in writing. Arabella's response had been verbal and, by the parent's account, dismissive. The parent had filed a formal complaint with the district. I noted it. Programs affected, 1. Weeks elapsed, 2. Formal complaints, 1. 3 weeks in, Gideon sent a longer message. Arabella had met with the reading intervention specialist, Dr. Carla, whose program I had recruited her for. Whose research I had read in a journal at 11 at night, whose 4-day-per-week intervention structure had become a compliance anchor for the Early Childhood Federal Grant, and informed her that sessions would be reduced from 4 days a week to 2. The reasoning given was freeing up classroom time for test preparation. Dr. Carla had pushed back. She had cited her own published research showing that below 2 sessions per week, the intervention effect dropped to near 0 for the target population. She had asked whether the grant compliance implications had been reviewed. Arabella had thanked her for the input. The change had been implemented on Monday. By Friday, Dr. Carla had submitted a formal letter of concern to the district's curriculum office. I read Gideon's account twice. Then I opened the grant requirements document, which was legitimately in my files as part of my new portfolio review responsibilities, and pulled up the specific compliance clause. The federal grant required the school to demonstrate and maintain a multi-tiered reading support system with a minimum of 4 direct intervention contacts per week for qualifying students. This was not a guideline. It was a condition of the award. 2 contacts per week was not compliance. I wrote a memo to Josephine noting that changes to the reading intervention schedule at Thornfield might require review for grant compliance. I flagged the specific clause and the specific requirement. I CC'd Hadrian and the district's grants compliance officer. I kept my copy, which now included the memo, the send timestamp, and the read receipts. I need to say something about Hadrian now, because I have not been fully accurate about what we were to each other, and that matters for understanding everything that followed. For the first 4 years of my tenure at Thornfield, we had been close in the way that professional people sometimes become close when they share a vision and work well together. He had championed my budget requests, defended my hiring decisions to skeptical board members, backed my grant applications at the district level when other principals were being told to hold off. There had been a mutual respect, built on evidence rather than feeling. I had trusted him the way I trusted very few people, based on what I had seen him do over time, not on what he said about himself. In year 5, something shifted, or perhaps it revealed itself. And when he began bringing in outside consultants, he began talking about Thornfield's market positioning in language that made me write the phrase in my notes with quotation marks. He developed a different relationship with the word stakeholders. He began, gradually and then less gradually, preferring the principals who didn't push back. We were not romantic. I want to be precise about that, because the story wants to be that, and it isn't. But there was a closeness, a working intimacy built over years, and when I sat in that conference room and watched him explain lateral to me with a water glass he didn't drink from, I felt the specific cold of a betrayal that was not entirely a surprise. Betrayal that doesn't surprise you has a particular temperature. It is harder to name than shock. It is more durable. By the end of Arabella's first month, the formal complaint count had reached 14. Complaints 1 through 4, scheduling changes affecting students with accommodation plans. Arabella had reorganized the master's schedule without consulting the special education coordinator, and 3 students had been placed in class periods that conflicted with IEP-mandated services. An IEP, an Individualized Education Program, is a federal document. The services it mandates are not administrative preferences. A school that fails to provide mandated IEP services is not in a gray area. It is in violation of federal law. Complaints 5 through 7, Communication failures. Parents who had been receiving weekly teacher updates through a communication protocol I had built with the district's parent liaison office had stopped receiving them. No one had transferred the protocol. And complaint 8. A parent reported that the gifted enrichment curriculum had been suspended pending program review with no timeline given. I had reviewed that curriculum in year 8 and tied it to university-level rubrics. It had no pending review in my records. There had been no review requested before I left. Complaints 9 through 11. 3 separate parents reported their children had described a staff meeting at which the school's emphasis on student-centered learning was being shifted toward, in Arabella's phrasing, measurable outcomes. I do not object to measurable outcomes. My entire early childhood program was built on them. But the way you address a staff matters. A staff that feels spoken at rather than with will tell their students. And students carry things home. Complaints 12 through 14, miscellaneous. And a cafeteria menu changed without notice. Parking situation at pickup restructured without community input. A teacher reported to have been spoken to sharply in a public hallway. I did not feel satisfied by any of this. I want to say that plainly. What I felt was something closer to the cold precision of confirming a hypothesis I had hoped was wrong. An institution is not a set of policies. It is a set of relationships and understandings and load-bearing arrangements that look invisible until someone who doesn't know they're there walks through them. I documented each complaint. Category, date, programs or populations affected, relevant grant or compliance implications where applicable. 8 weeks into Arabella's tenure, I received an email from the federal program officer for the early childhood grant. Asayid had been sent to the school's administrative address and CC'd to my district email because I remained on the grant's official correspondence list and no one had updated it. The email was a standard renewal reminder. The window had opened. The narrative update, budget projections, and program outcome documentation were due in 9 weeks. The program officer noted at the bottom that she had not yet heard from the school's new principal regarding the transition and wanted to ensure continuity was being managed appropriately. I forwarded it to Josephine. Then I sent a separate note directly to Hadrian. I told him the renewal required the building principal's direct involvement, that the deadline was firm, that a missed renewal would result in a loss of funding supporting 12 staff positions and 340 students, and that based on the program officer's email, Arabella had not yet initiated contact with the federal office. I offered to prepare a briefing document. He replied the next morning. "Thank you for flagging this, Mara. I'll make sure Arabella is aware." 7 words, no follow-up, no request for the briefing document. I noted the date, the content, and the absence of action. I kept my copy. Josephine called me into her office on a Wednesday morning in week 10 and closed the door behind me, which she had never done before. Her office smelled like paper and the particular staleness of a room used primarily for things that needed to stay contained. "The board office has been getting calls," she said, each word placed carefully. "About Thornfield?" I asked. "About the transition." She paused. "Well, Hadrian is describing it as a typical adjustment period. How many complaints would it take for it to become atypical in his assessment?" She looked at her desk for a moment. "I don't know," she said, "but I'd make sure your files are organized." It was the most direct thing she had said to me since I arrived. I thanked her and went back to my desk and organized my files. Gideon called, not texted, on a Thursday evening in week 10. "She let Marcus go," he said. Marcus had been at Thornfield for 6 years. He had taken the Aldercroft partnership from a 1-semester pilot and built it into a 4-year sequence. 32 students were currently enrolled in dual enrollment university coursework through the agreement he managed. "What reason?" I asked. "Position elimination. The STEM coordinator role is being folded back into the department head structure." "Who did she consult?" "Nobody I know of." "Did she review the Aldercroft agreement?" A pause. "Mara, I don't think she knew the Aldercroft agreement existed." The Memorandum of Understanding with Aldercroft University named the STEM coordinator as primary institutional contact. It contained a specific clause requiring 30 days written notice and the formal appointment of a named replacement before any staffing change affecting the coordinator role could be executed. This was not boilerplate. I had negotiated that clause myself after a previous partnership with another institution had become complicated when a key contact changed without notice. If that clause had not been followed, and it had not, Marcus had been told his position was eliminated effective the following Friday. The MOU was now in breach. I ended the call, opened my files, read through the relevant clauses twice. Then I opened a new document and began drafting a memo that noted, purely as a factual matter, that changes to the STEM coordinator position at Thornfield may have implications for the district's existing MOU with Aldercroft University and recommended that legal counsel review the relevant clauses. I sent it to Josephine and to the district's general counsel. I kept my copy. The 23rd formal complaint was filed in week 10, and I heard about it through Josephine rather than Gideon. She called me into her office again, same closed door. "The board chair called Hadrian today," she said. I assumed she would. He told her he was managing it. I nodded. "The IEP complaints are the ones that concern me most," I said. "They concern me too," she said, which was the most she had said to me that wasn't about my actual job description. The state has reporting requirements for IEP service failures. "Yes," I said. "I know. I've documented the ones I'm aware of." She looked at me for a long moment. "How thorough is your documentation?" "Exhaustive," I said. The 29th complaint came from a parent of a child in the early childhood program. The parent had attended an open house and been told the program was being restructured. When they pressed for specifics, the answer had been that programming decisions were still being finalized. When they asked whether the federal grant supporting the program was still active, but Arabella's assistant had said she would look into it and not followed up. The parent came to the district office in person on a Thursday afternoon. I was leaving for a lunch I wouldn't eat when I saw her in the lobby. She was holding a printed copy of the program brochure from the year I wrote it. She was asking the front desk to speak with someone about the program's status. I could have walked past. I chose not to. I went back to my office and pulled up the current grant status. The renewal window had been open for 3 weeks. Arabella had submitted no preliminary documentation. The deadline was in 9 days. I drafted a memo to Josephine, CC'd Hadrian, CC'd the grant's compliance officer, and flagged the deadline in clear, factual language. I noted the relevant federal requirements. I noted the potential consequences of a missed renewal. I kept my copy. At 11:30 on the 7th night before the deadline, Hadrian emailed me. He needed the renewal submitted. He was asking, not requesting, asking me for my help. Arabella was still getting up to speed on the grant portfolio. He needed me to prepare the application. I read the email 3 times. Then I wrote back the following morning. I was glad to support the renewal process. As the grant was administered through the building principal, the submission would need to be reviewed and signed by Arabella. I could prepare a draft and transfer documentation by Friday. I would also need confirmation that my role in preparing the application was formally documented, as the work fell outside my current job description. He replied within the hour. Of course. Almost whatever I needed. I prepared the application in 4 days. 17 pages, the same count as the original. Every supporting document organized and labeled with the same system I had used for 12 years. A cover memo explaining the submission process step by step. I kept my copy of everything I sent. And I noted in my personal file that on this date I had been formally asked by the district superintendent to perform the core work of my original position because the person appointed to replace me lacked the institutional knowledge to perform it herself. I noted this without commentary. The facts were sufficient. On day 61, a letter arrived at the district from Aldercroft University's Office of Academic Partnerships, addressed to Hadrian. I received a copy 4 days later through a source I will not name, and I kept it. Honest, the letter was precise. It noted the STEM coordinator had been removed without the required notice and named replacement under the MOU. It noted that 32 students were currently enrolled in university-credited coursework and that their academic standing was in administrative limbo. It requested a response within 15 days. I had known the letter was coming, not because I had coordinated it. I had not contacted Aldercroft. But because I knew how the agreement worked, I knew the clauses, and I knew that the university's partnerships office was staffed by people as meticulous as I was. Hadrian sent a vague all-staff email the following day about managing stakeholder expectations. I printed it and filed it. The 37th complaint was different. It came from a parent who was also a licensed occupational therapist, and it was detailed in the way that professional knowledge makes things detailed. Specific regulatory language, specific dates, specific reference to 3 students whose IEP-mandated services had been interrupted by scheduling changes implemented without the required consultation of the special education team. At the bottom of the form, the parent noted a copy had been filed with the State Department of Education. I heard about it from Josephine, who was standing when I came into her office for the 3rd time, which told me something had changed in the weight of this. "The board is calling a special session," she said. "When?" 3 weeks. I nodded. "Will there be an administrative review?" "There will be now," she said. I had been preparing the summary document for 3 weeks. A clear, organized, odd chronological account of every compliance matter I had identified since my transfer, every memo I had sent, every response I had received or not received, every document attached in its original form. No editorializing, no commentary, no recommendations, facts, dates, documents. My mother had been a bookkeeper. She had taught me that the purpose of documentation is not to make your case. It is to make the case make itself. You arrange the information so that the reader arrives at the conclusion without being told what the conclusion is. The moment you tell them the conclusion, they can dispute your interpretation. If you just give them the facts in order, there is nothing to dispute. I formatted the document over 4 evenings. I ran it by my lawyer, who had now reviewed my employment contract in full. "Oh, the transition addendum clause," she said when I called her on a Friday afternoon. She specialized in public sector employment contracts. I had kept her card in the back of my wallet for 3 years with no particular plan. "They gave me a 3-week transition period," I said. "The clause requires 60 days and a structured briefing covering active grants, contracts, institutional partnerships, and compliance obligations." "Do you have documentation of the breach?" I described the filing system my mother had taught me to maintain. There was a pause on the line. "How complete is it?" "Complete," I said. "Define complete." I told her about the grant files, the Aldercroft MOU, the curriculum documentation, the compliance memos, the email timestamps, the response records. She was quiet for a moment. I'll review the contract formally," she said. "But I'll tell you now, if the documentation is what you're describing, the district has significant exposure here, not just morally, contractually." "I know," I said. I had known for some time. The 47th formal complaint was filed on the morning of the board's special session. It came from a parent whose child was enrolled in the dual enrollment STEM track. The parent had paid a university application fee for a course that was no longer being offered. They wanted a refund and a written explanation. And they noted, at the bottom of the form, that copies had been sent to the university's ombudsman and the state attorney general's education division. A complaint forwarded to the AG's office is a different category of complaint. "Oh, I heard about it from Gideon at 8:15 in the morning. The board session was at 2. I was already in the car. The conference room for the board session was larger than the one where this had started. Long rectangular table, a row of seats along the wall for staff and public observers. The kind of room that has been the site of many careful conversations and is furnished accordingly. I sat in the row of seats, not at the table. Arabella was at the table. She was wearing a blazer the same caliber as the first one, and she had a leather portfolio and a pen she kept turning between her fingers. Once, twice, stop. Once, twice, stop. Hadrian was at the table. He did not look at me when I came in. The board chair called the session to order and stated the purpose, an administrative review of the Thornfield transition in light of community concerns. Then she read a summary of the complaints. 47, by category. Scheduling irregularities affecting students with IEPs. Communication protocol failures affecting the parent community. Personnel decisions executed without following established institutional protocols. Failure to maintain compliance with existing partnership agreements. Potential exposure under federal grant requirements. Pending state-level reporting obligations related to IEP service disruptions. She read the list in a flat, measured voice without looking up from the paper. The room did not move. When she finished, she asked if anyone wished to provide context. Hadrian spoke first. He used the words challenges and adjustment period and opportunities for improvement. He spoke for about 7 minutes and said nothing that hadn't been in his all-staff emails. Arabella spoke next. She was controlled and composed, and she accepted responsibility in the way that people accept responsibility when they are hoping responsibility will stay at the level of abstraction and not require anything specific to change. Then the board chair looked at the row of seats. "We've also asked for a briefing from the Director of Curriculum Development," she said. "Mara, would you like to present?" I stood. I did not use slides. I had a printed copy of the summary document, and each board member had a copy in front of them, which I had arranged through the board clerk by email 3 days prior. I spoke for 22 minutes. I covered, and in order, the early childhood grant portfolio and its compliance structure, and the current renewal status, the Aldercroft MOU and its specific clauses, and the breach that had occurred when the STEM coordinator was removed without following the required process, the IEP service disruptions and their regulatory implications at both the state and federal level, the transition addendum in my employment contract, which I cited by clause and page number, and the 60-day briefing period that had not been completed, the grant renewal that had been submitted 5 days before the deadline with my assistance, at formal request from the superintendent, using documentation from my personal files. I did not say that any of this was Arabella's fault. I did not say that any of this was Hadrian's fault. I presented documented facts in chronological order with sources attached. When I sat down, the room was quiet long enough that I became aware of the ventilation system. The board member I had given a 45-minute presentation to in year 4, the one who had called it the most useful thing he had seen in that room in 3 years, looked at Hadrian. "When the IEP service disruptions were occurring," he said, "were you aware?" Hadrian paused. "I was aware that concerns had been raised." "Did you take action?" Another pause, shorter. "I communicated with the principal's office." The board member wrote something on his copy of the summary document. I could not see what it was. 3 weeks after the special session, the board voted. A formal administrative review of the Thornfield transition had to be conducted by an independent educational consultant. A requirement for written documentation from Hadrian of all communications related to the IEP service failures and grant compliance matters. A referral to the district's legal counsel to review the transition addendum and advise on district obligations, and an oversight committee, a temporary structure requiring that Thornfield's administrative decisions affecting personnel, curriculum, grants, or institutional partnerships be reviewed by a district-level team before implementation. I was appointed to that team, not as principal, not yet. But in the room, Hadrian came to my office 3 days after the vote. He closed the door and sat down, and the room smelled like his particular cologne and the stale carpet and whatever had been stored next door for the last decade. He looked at his hands first. "I should have handled the transition better," he said. I waited. "The addendum clause." He looked up. "You were right to flag it." "I flagged it to the board's legal counsel," I said. "Not to you. That was a deliberate choice." He looked at me directly for a moment. He understood what that meant. "The addendum was in the contract for a reason," I said. "I put it there because I understood that 12 years of institutional knowledge doesn't transfer automatically when a person leaves a position. It has to be transferred deliberately through a structured process, or the institution absorbs the loss in the form of the failures we saw this quarter. The clause wasn't for my protection. It was for the schools." He was quiet. "The Wyndham connection," I said, "between Arabella and the consulting firm. Oh, the board's counsel is going to surface it in the audit. I'm not going to be the one who raises it." His jaw moved. "You've been very thorough," he said. "I've been organized," I said. "It's a different thing." He left. I saw Arabella once after the board session in the hallway outside the district conference room. She had been called to speak with the oversight committee. I was leaving as she arrived. She stopped. "You built that school over 12 years, she said. "Yes," I said. "I didn't know about the grant," she said. "Or the Aldercroft MOU. Nobody briefed me on any of it?" "No," I said. "They didn't." I looked at her. She was 31 and not unintelligent, and she had walked into something rocketed for someone else's benefit and not her own. She had been used in a particular way, and I was not without the capacity to understand what that felt like. Understanding it was not the same as softening toward it. "The committee will provide the full briefing documentation," I said. "Everything will be in order going forward." I walked past her and did not look back. The independent consultant submitted his findings 8 weeks after the special session. The report was 43 pages. I received it by email on a Thursday morning at 9 and read it in full before responding to anything. The findings were direct and specific. The transition had failed to follow district protocol in 5 documented areas. The omission of the transition addendum briefing period was characterized as a significant administrative failure with documented institutional consequences. The Aldercroft MOU breach was flagged as requiring formal legal remedy. The IEP service disruptions required specific remediation with binding timelines. The consultant noted that the documentation made available to the review process had been unusually complete and had greatly facilitated the accuracy of the report. That sentence was about my files. I noted it. I did not tell anyone. 2 weeks after the report's release, Hadrian announced his retirement. The email was warm and appropriate, and used the word chapter in a way I had been told not to use. I read it once, noted the date, and filed it. I had imagined, in some version of this, that I would feel something recognizable when it came. Some form of satisfaction with edges. What I felt instead was the specific quiet of a noise stopping that you had been hearing for so long you had stopped registering it. 3 weeks after the retirement announcement, Arabella requested time before the Oversight Committee as a presenter, not a participant. She came in with a document she had written herself, a transition self-assessment structured around each finding in the consultant's report, with a remediation plan that named specific people, specific timelines, and specific compliance benchmarks. She presented it in 20 minutes. She did not minimize anything. She did not attribute any of the failures to the circumstances of her appointment, though she could have, and it would have been accurate. When she finished, she said, "I know this doesn't address everything, but I want the record to show that I understand what happened." The committee asked specific procedural questions, and she answered them without hedging. I watched and said very little. After the meeting in the hallway, she paused beside me. "The labor organizing unit in AP history," she said. I shouldn't have questioned it. "No," I said. She nodded. That was the end of the conversation. The board chair called me in on a Monday morning. Just her. Not the full board. Coffee she didn't offer to share, and a directness I had always respected in her. "We're recommending a return to Thornfield," she said. "As principal, with a revised contract. You'd work in a formal co-leadership structure with the current principal for 6 months, then transition to sole leadership at the review date." She slid a folder across the desk. I opened it. As the contract was on top, there was a new addendum drafted by the board's legal counsel. It was 8 pages longer than my previous addendum. "They used your original addendum as the foundation," she said. "Your transition clause is now district policy, not just for Thornfield, across all schools." I read the first page. "I'll need 2 weeks to review this with my attorney," I said. "Of course." "One question." She waited. "The Oversight Committee, will it continue through the co-leadership period?" She looked at me for a moment. "Yes," she said. "We expected you'd want that." My attorney called the evening before the signing. "There's a new clause I want to make sure you see," she said. 90-day mandatory transition period for any principal removal or transfer. Formal briefing document protocol. A structured onboarding tied to each school's specific institutional assets before any independent administrative authority is granted. "They wrote the transition clause into the standard contract," I said. "They did," she said. "Your addendum is now district policy. Any principal who leaves any school in this district, going forward, has to do it properly." I was at my kitchen table, the same table where 4 months earlier I had opened a document and typed the word Thornfield into a title field and started writing. The glass of water from that night had been replaced by tea I was actually drinking. The kitchen looked the same. I was slightly different in a way I could not have named precisely, but would not have traded. "I'll sign it," I said. "I know." she said. I just wanted you to notice. I drove to Thornfield on a Thursday morning in late spring. The oak trees the district had once wanted to cut were fully out now. That particular pale green of early spring leaves that looks slightly lit from the inside. The kind of green you only get for about 10 days before it deepens and becomes just leaves. I parked in the spot closest to the back entrance that had been informally mine for 12 years and that no one had ever challenged, and I sat in the car for a moment and let the engine go quiet. The building looked the same, 4 stories of brick and old windows, and the science wing on the 3rd floor where the lights came on too early and stayed on too late. The oak trees I had fought for were budding at the tips of their branches. Inside, the hallway smelled like chalk and industrial cleaning solution, and faintly, the beginning of whatever the cafeteria was making for lunch, even though it was 8 in the morning. And beneath all of that, the specific smell of a building that has been in use for a long time and remembers all of it. Gideon was in the hallway outside his classroom with his yellow legal pad. He was writing on it, which was unusual. He looked up when I came through the dormier. We didn't say anything. He gave me the kind of nod that contains a full paragraph and then turned and went into his classroom. I walked down the hallway to the principal's office. The door had a new nameplate. Temporary, both names printed on it, the format of a thing in transition. I had a key. I let myself in. Noticed the office smelled like recirculated air and paper and the faint record of whoever had been in it and whatever they had tried. There was a plant on the windowsill that someone had been watering, and that was, tentatively, doing fine. I put my bag on the desk. I opened my laptop. I created a new folder. I named it Thornfield 2. Then I opened it and started to write.
One of the Purge films in my city. Oh, there was a guillotine and a bunch of fake heads inside a bin. Ah, good. Good and normal and fine. Never heard the source of this sample. Ah, wait, what are they, what's it in? Yeah, this is Chicago. People in cinema these days never look kind of normal. Oh, or a bit weird. Yeah. The sample from the verse was in a dance song years ago. This is the original. You said the same. Oh, Dreamer. That's terrifying. I dream about meeting people when I've watched enough of their streams, YouTube videos, performances. That absolutely counts. Yes, congratulations. Look at that. Yeah. Street player. Chicago. Chapel Roan skins coming to the old Fortnite. Needles. This is huge news. Does anyone else here play Fortnite? Fortnite? Original threw me. I am incapable of saying original. I have to say original, and it is a curse. Yes. Deep sickness. Yes. Yeah. Original. Period films set in the 1500s or ancient Rome. It's full of Cinder. Yeah. I feel like I saw a reel about that recently. This song is fully 9 minutes long. We're only halfway through. Todd! Hi, Todd. I might appear in your dream grocery store. I'll be buying something really, really boring. Just a 6-pack of eggs. Free range, cage free, of course. Thank you, Louise. Plenty of time for a sax solo. You have about 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Oral ginal? 6-pack of eggs. I know. It would only be a 6-pack too. Just saw Liz there. Oh, what was she getting? What was her cereal? Okay. Did someone say eggs? Yes, if you subscribe to Pinion Paint, and you'll get access to such wonderful, inexplicable emotes as egg, deviled egg. Don't you need a payment plan for that? Are they normal now? Are they normal prices? Poor Liz. Aww. There's a glass-covered bulletin board in the background of literally the final shot of the movie. Oh, uh-oh. Oh, scapula. Good luck. Okay, wait. I'm going to get the cats. Please enjoy. Chair. And a dance break?